Awesome. All right. So where we're going to kick it off is where we left off last week, and we're going to be starting on page 60. And it's right after those three pertinent ideas. And I don't know about you guys, but this is an exciting part of the book. We're really going to be diving in and delving into step 3 and that third step decision. Now, I won't do too much review. We won't need to go into the details between the M dash and the N dash. I know everybody is just waiting patiently for me to go on a grammatical tangent. I know, but I'll try to restrain myself. But what I will cover is what we spoke about last week. Was we went through the description of what the 12 steps are. Just read them as they're found on page 59 and top of page 60. And so ultimately what we're getting into is our third step decision. And if I'm confused about what the third step decision is, very simply put, now we're going to go real into it, but very simply put, if you take nothing else from this study today, very simply, the 12-step decision, it is a decision to work these 12 steps as a way of life. And then I always like to add, like our life depends on it, because it does. And that's what we're going to decide to do. But before I make that decision, I got to be convinced of some stuff. Right. And so that's where we left off with those three pertinent ideas that we read at the end of how it works at meetings that read how it works. And keep in mind, the first pertinent idea, A, that we're alcoholics and could not manage our own lives, that is a step 1 idea. That is a step 1 proposition, that I have this illness and my life is unmanageable. Then we've got that B, probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. That is also a step 1 idea, that idea that I am beyond that human power, beyond that human aid, that doesn't matter the best sponsor, psychologist, psychiatrist, treatment center, I am beyond human aid. And then we've got C, that God could and would if he were sought. And that is a step 2 idea, that God is bigger than my alcoholism, or whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study. And that leads us into that third step and that third step decision. So if I'm convinced of those things, I'm ready to be convinced. It's as being convinced that we were at step 3. And it makes sense if I have an understanding of step 1, which is that I am going to drink again, or use again, or relapse in this compulsive behavior again. That is the hopelessness of my dilemma. But there's hope in step 2. It makes sense that I gotta go to take the actions to get me to that place of hope. I mean, when I understand 1, I understand 2. I mean, it's logical that the third step decision is what would follow. So it says being convinced we're at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? And what I want to point out is that in step 3, I am deciding to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I'm not turning my will and my life over to the care of God. It is a very subtle distinction, but that distinction is important. Now, y'all know I just love my geography because I'm fun at parties. Now, if you don't mind, I'm gonna borrow Janessa because right now she's in Mexico and she's hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, having a great time. And here's the thing. Step 1, yeah, she is. Step 1 is about me realizing, now this is a metaphor. Step 1 is if I stay where I'm at, Calgary, Alberta, I will relapse. That's what step 1 is. Step 2 is about believing Mexico exists. Well, I don't have to know anything about Mexico. I don't have to learn Spanish. I don't got to know the intricacies of some of the geography. I just got to believe that Janessa is not lying, that she's there. Now, in the third step, what I am doing is deciding to go to Mexico. And I always like to say, that's it. I've decided. I'm coming. Hope David doesn't mind. I'm a crash. I'm coming to Mexico. You know what I mean? Now, I've made that decision. But if I do not follow that decision up with any sort of action, I'm going to stay right here in Calgary, Alberta. So that decision needs to be followed with action. And the action in the metaphor is to get my passport, the gifts of sobriety. I have one and I know where it is. Those are 2 separate gifts. You know, that panic at 3 in the morning, where's my birth certificate? That, you know, or that shirt I haven't seen forever, focus page. But I got to get a plane ticket. I got to get myself to the airport. I got to go through security and I got to find my gate. And then I got to get on the plane, and only when that plane touches down in Mexico am I in Mexico. So I'm deciding to do the work that will turn my will and my life over to the care of God. My will and my life get turned over through the actions of the 12 steps, and I'm deciding to do those. Hopefully that made sense. Also, I would have to pack some sunscreen because I'm quite pale. Anywho, sun safety, that's important while we're here. All right. But to be able to make that decision, again, it's a big decision. It is not it's not just a decision, it's simply a decision, but it is a pretty big decision. And to make that decision, I've got to be convinced of some stuff, and there's some requirements that I probably got to check off in, we're on page 60. So very bottom paragraph, page 60. And so it says the first requirement. So for me to make this decision, I need this as a requirement. Requirement number one is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And that was news to me. I don't know about anyone else, because I don't know about anyone else. I kind of wanted to compartmentalize it. You know what I mean? I will maybe make a decision to turn my alcoholism or my addiction over. No, any life, my family, employment, you know what I mean? Any part of my life. And that it doesn't work can hardly be a success. And it says on that basis, so the basis of me being in charge and running my life, and we can ask ourselves, is this my experience? On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Is my experience that when I am trying to run and manage my life and live my life on self-will, I'm bumping up against people. I'm coming into collision with people. Things aren't working out, and I'm just becoming exacerbated and exasperated, like nothing's working. Is that my experience? And I love the subtlety with which the book meets me where I'm at, even though our motives are good. I know, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I know I have caused harm and had to make amends for things that I did with the best motives. You know what I mean? This is an Al-Anon principle. This idea that and blew my mind. It was the idea that I don't know what's best. Now I know some of you guys are like, what? But like truly, the idea that I do not know what was best is mind-blowing for me. Especially when we're talking about this work and this way of life and people who are dying from this illness. What do you mean I don't know what's best? Of course it would be best if they pick up the book, take the steps, go through this course of action and experience freedom from their suffering. No, I don't know what's best. I know what might seem easiest though. So even with the best motives, when I try to force and impose self-will, it hasn't worked for me. I'm in collision, and that's been my experience. So it says each person is, no, sorry. Even though our motives are good, most people try to live by self-propulsion. Self-propulsion is a synonym for self-will. Try to live based upon self-will. And Rob's got a super fun definition in the chat where it's self-propulsion, providing one's driving or propelling force. So moving myself, self-propulsion. So it goes on to say each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if people would do as he wished, life would be great. Have I ever had that feeling? Like, listen, if you sponsees, family, children, the people would just do what I think they should do, everything would be fine. Like if the little arrangements that I've made would just stay put, it would be great. It would be wonderful. And then it goes, everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Yes, I know I will be pleased, but that's just a unfortunate byproduct of me fixing the world with my self-will. You know what I mean? And it said, life would be wonderful. Now, keep in mind, in this metaphor, I really like to dive into this metaphor. Imagine that I'm in a play, And imagine the play is Romeo and Juliet. And some of y'all might have remembered high school English class. It might be like, Paige, I don't know if you're aware, that story doesn't end very well. Seems a little codependent. I know, I like the drama. So I'm in Romeo and Juliet, right? And he said, I think I'm a Juliet. Like, I think, ooh, main character energy. Like, that's what I'm trying to bring to the show. Listen, let's be real. I am tree number 3. You know what I'm saying? I am not the lead. I'm tree number 3, and I'm showing up to this play, tree number 3. Now, I think I know how the play's supposed to go. Now, keep in mind, I don't have a full script. I got a little sheet of paper, like a little one, that says my lines. And what are my lines? Sway in the breeze. That's my lines for tree number 3. You know what I'm saying? I don't got the full script. I don't know the lighting cues. You know what I mean? And I do not know anything about like color theory and lighting. I'm like, just make it bright. Look at me. Woo. You know what I mean? I don't know that. And I don't know like the sound and the music. I listen, I'll bring alt polka to the mix and I don't get why people are resisting. We're gonna rock out with some alt polka. No? Just you can tell I don't know a lot about music. I'm gonna make up my own genres. And listen, I'm showing up, tree number 3, and I'm showing up, and I'm trying to like I'm in a tree suit. If you're wondering why I look like this, I'm in my little tree costume. I gotta shimmer my way into the center stage because that's where trees grow best. I mean, obviously, and I'm gonna be nice about it, and I'm gonna tell people where I think they need to stand, and I think but I don't know. Now I'm gonna try to organize my play how I think it should go. Now, keep in mind that there's other actors, and this is how I'm going to show up as tree number 3, trying to run the whole thing. So it says, in trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. Did you know? Just saintly Paige over here as the tree, right? He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. Yes, And then it says, on the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. Feeling a little called out. It's okay if I'm the only one that is. And it says, but as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits, which we know this doesn't apply to me. I'm not like this. I'm a tree. So tree number 3 doesn't apply. So I'm going around and I'm trying to make these arrangements. I'm trying to tell people where they need to stand. And I'm trying to tell people what the makeup needs to look like. And I'm trying to listen, if you just stay here and say this, that's what you need to do. And people are going to respond and react to that. And so this is the response and the reaction to me trying to direct and control and manage the whole show. What usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat himself right, or doesn't treat him right. And that's that idea where I start to fall into self-pity and poor me and you don't understand. And what is my response to things not going my way? He decides to exert himself more. See, self is not working, but what am I going to try to do? I'm trying to exert self upon self. And we're going to see that doesn't work. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Anyone? I'm sure I'm not the only one that was like, you know what? This is a problem. I am just going to explain myself better, or I'm just going to be more forceful or more direct or more, you know what I mean? Try to force it, but it still doesn't work. So still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he's sure that other people are more to blame, right? I can see that, I might have like bumped off like Romeo or Juliet trying to get in center stage a little. But, I'm listen, if you would just move over and go where I think you need to go, and heck, maybe I'll avoid the double suicide at the end of the play. Spoilers for anyone. Sorry, I didn't mean to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen Shakespeare. I know it's hot off the press. Spoiler alert, my bad. But I'm doing it with the best motives, you know what I mean? And then I can ask myself, Is this my experience that I'm showing up to life with these characteristics? He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Now, is that not me? That as I show up to life with this anger and this indignation, man, it's not fair, it's not right, and I fall into that self-pity and that self-hatred. Is that my experience? What is his basic trouble? Well, I thought up until that point it was you guys not doing what I thought you needed to do. No, here it is. Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Now, I got some news for you. I came into the rooms and I would identify myself as a people pleaser. Turns out that is incorrect because transparently, I actually don't care if you're pleased. Pleased is not my goal as a people pleaser. They're not pleased people. I have not seen them, don't know where they are. I don't care if they're pleased and they're not pleased. What I am is an approval. We're going to use the word seeker. We're not going to use the word that I normally use with my sponsees. But what I am after is not whether or not you are pleased. What I am after is your approval. Am I not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Is not my virtuous behavior really about getting you to like me and think I'm great? And that was, listen, I am so sorry if anyone just came here and I ruined your day. I just had my day ruined when I got that information. So I thought imperative to pass along, you know? And so that's what we're talking about, is self-seeker in even when trying to be kind. People-pleasing behavior, but I ain't no people pleaser. I need you to like me. And then it says, is he not a victim of the delusion? Now, keep in mind the language that we're using here, victim of a delusion. When was the last time we spoke about being the victim of the delusion or a delusion? When did we use language like that? Well, we drove that point home in the chapter more about alcoholism, talking about the delusion of the mental obsession, the insanity of taking that first drink. And this delusion is as insane as me trying to take the first drink thinking it'll be different this time. So here's how. Like, this is the depth of the distortion. Here it is. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Now, yeah, evident is, can't we all see, right? But the word rest with a W, means to take by force. It is the root. Sorry, for those, I know there are people here that were not here for the grammatical or etymological background to words, but I'm having fun at parties, just as long as they're not too loud and I get to go to bed early. Woo! Fun. But the root, rest is the root of the word wrestle, which is to take by force. Now, if we look at it, is it not clear that I'm trying to wrestle satisfaction and happiness, and just if I can manage well? Is it not intuitive that that's not the way I get to happiness? You see, the more I try to wrestle, the more I try to fight, the less joy there is in my life. How do I get to satisfaction and happiness? Well, I got to rest with an R. I got to lose the W. Steps 4 through 9, what we're doing is we're losing the W. Step 3, a decision to lose the W. Sometimes I say these things quite randomly, and I worry they're the only takeaways people get from the Big Book study. It's like, what did you learn? Lose the W. You know, like, that's the only thing. I hope it's not. Okay. But I got to rest with an R. And the beautiful sort of juxtaposition of language is the difference between trying to pull and wrestle and get versus like rest. Has anyone ever seen, I have a sponsee that just loves lazy rivers. You know, it's that like slow moving pool, you got a little inner tube and you just float. And that's what I'm called to do, rest with an R. And I mean, who's got me in this river? It's God, the God of our own understanding. That's who's got me. And that's what I'm learning to do, rest in that lazy river. And the trouble is when I'm trying to wrestle the river, you know, that expression, trying to push the water upstream, that's me, and it don't work, you know. So, and is it not evident, right? This is how I show up when I'm in self. Is it not evident? Do you not see? Evident to the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? Like what I want is more important than what everyone else wants. You know what I mean? And this is how we're perceived by others. So when I'm living in self and trying to manage the world and manage other people, even with good and wonderful and kind and loving motives, and I do it in a kind and loving way, this is how people respond and react to us. It says, and do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show. I have this description of what happens when I'm coming from self. I live in this mindset of scarcity. And you see, when I am living and trying to run my life my way, there's not enough. Do you know what I mean? There's not enough love. There's not enough affection. There's not enough care. There's not enough compassion. There's not enough kindness. There's not enough money. There's not enough success. There is not enough. And you see, when I'm living in self, if you get a promotion, I get insecure and jealous because that's taken from me. Or you get a raise, I get insecure and jealous because that's taken from me. Or you get married and I get insecure and jealous because that's taken from me. And see, what we're going to do is we're going to begin. We're just seeing that this is where we're at. We're going to, as a result of these 12 steps, we're going to come from a different angle. See, as we rest in God, the world is one of abundance because I'm not trying to control and manage and get from my success and people this. I'm getting it from God. And you see, when I rest in that lazy river, which happens through the 12 steps, I know sometimes I hear my metaphors as I say them. I'm like, I know they're weird. I know, I'm aware, but as we rest in that lazy river with God, what I'm doing is I'm coming from a place of abundance. See, if I'm coming from God, there is more than enough love, money, security. There's more than enough. And you see, when you get that, I don't need to strive and grasp and try to get mine because God's got mine. And I can offer that support and unconditional love. Like that's the power of that transition. But see, when I'm coming from self, I'm a grab at the show is tree number 3, and the other trees are going to be grabbing, and there's not enough. And we're trying to manage and control, and it just doesn't work. And it says, is he not even in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Has that not been my experience? That even with the best motives, even being kind, I just made a mess of things. You know what I'm saying? And so that's the metaphor of the actor and the director. And so I'm gonna be tree number 3, and I'm gonna be real nice about it, and I'm gonna be real kind, but then that's not gonna work. So maybe I'm gonna lose my temper a time or two and try to force my will, but I'm just trying to manage the show, and it doesn't work. And so in this metaphor, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna get fired from the perceived directorial position. I am no longer going to be the director. What I am simply going to do is I'm going to follow directions. That's it. And for a member of 12 step, at the 3rd step, what is the next direction? Pick up a pen and paper, do the inventory. That's my next direction. But you see, it's a bit of a leap of faith. If you've ever been on stage, it doesn't matter if it's like an elementary school pageant, but you've been on stage and the lights are on you and you can't see out into the audience. It's dark, What we're going to have to do is trust. It's going to be a little bit of a leap of faith, a little bit of trust that in the audience, right in the middle, right smack dab, is the capital D director. Now that director, he's got the full script. He knows the lighting cues. Those little X's and marks on the floor. You know what those mean? I don't. God does. Our director does. And he knows where the props are supposed to be, the scenes are supposed to set and be changed. He knows all of that. And all I'm going to do is follow my lines. And again, in this metaphor, what are my lines? Well, sway in the breeze, right? And I love that was an accidental metaphor, because you see in the 2nd step, we talk about how, that the fighting, overcoming that, but I can't see God, just like I cannot see the wind. But you see, what we can see is the effect of the wind on others. See, when I'm called to sway in the breeze, I know who thought I would take tree number 3 so seriously? But when I am called to say my lines and sway in the breeze, what that means is I am called to be moved by God and to be an expression of God in everything that I do. And I do that through working these 12 steps. So that's what I'm trying to do. I know. Tree number 3. I'm no Juliet. Oh, and so if we're working through this part of the book, maybe by ourselves, or maybe we're sponsoring somebody, a really helpful exercise is to go through this part of the book and read it in the first person. You know, what usually happens, the show doesn't go off well for Paige. Paige is self-seeking. Paige, you know what I mean? Putting my name, or as we're working with sponsees, our sponsees' names through this part of the book, and seeing how that lines up with our experience. Now it says our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. Now keep in mind yeah, self-centered, focused on self, centered on me. Tree number 3 didn't necessarily think tree number 3 was the best and thought everything, you know, like there was some of it where we were filled with self-pity and life was unfair. See, what it means to be self-centered is centered upon myself. And I am not the sort of person who is self-centered. I am so great. I am so wonderful. Y'all need to listen to me. That is not how I center on me. I center on me. I'm the biggest piece of garbage. That's how I center on me. And I don't use garbage. I use some words that I won't say because I'm doing the big book study, but we know those words. That's how I center on me. But I'm still centered upon me. And I can't live there. So egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. Now, if you're needing, lolls is to lounge, to loaf. It doesn't mean LOL, laugh out loud, for the millennials that might have gotten a little, you know, LMAO, BRB. I don't, why am I like this? Anywho, and then it's so funny too, because Florida Sunshine, I'm always like, that is a great name for a performer. You know, welcome to the stage, Florida Sunshine. What Florida Sunshine is performing is you guys decide. That's it. That's on you. What she's doing there. But great name. And what I love about the Florida Sunshine, the retired businessman who's, you know, he's in this Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. Now, before the meet, we were talking about how, you know, it's like snowy and cold where I live. You know, he is in Florida, and it's the white sandy beaches and the beautiful like waves and the palm trees, and there's a beautiful breeze. But I don't know if y'all caught it. He's not there. He's pissed about things that are happening elsewhere in the world. Anyone ever ruin a vacation with what's going on in your head? You know what I mean? Yeah, he's not there in the beautiful moment. And then it says, the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. You know, that same minister who, you know, like any of us and all of us, isn't able to overcome our own defects of character. You know, that idea that I show up and I'm trying to overcome and just do better and be better and not act out in that stupid way, but I can't. But I think you all need to do what I think you need to do to overcome your defects of character, especially the ones that I don't like, that make mine look bad. You know what I mean? That's that metaphor. And then it says, politicians and reformers who are sure all would be, capital U, utopia, if the rest of the world only behaved. Now, I'm sure no one gathered that over the last few years, things have gotten a little divided, a little heated, and people got a little angry about that. I'm sure you can imagine that if one side of whatever issue got their way, there would be about half the other people on the other side that would be absolutely angered and pissed off. And how insane it would be for there to be utopia if somebody got their way. You know what I mean? And it says, the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. Now, it's not my business to necessarily take his inventory, but I will point out that what he has done is cracked a whole lot of safes, which not super allowed, kind of illegal, a scotch. And also, just if you're wondering, locksmith, it's a lucrative trade. You let me know the next time you lock yourself out. You know what I mean? So he's got those skills. He could, you know, he could do something with those skills. I don't let me give anyone career advice. But yeah, like that's what he can do. So it says, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. And so what we're seeing in all of these examples is me thinking I know what's best and me trying to live based on self-will and run the life that we're living in all those examples is not working. And it says, whatever our protestation, that idea of protestation is our beliefs, our values, whatever those are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity. Oh, you know, in a book published in 1939 just attacks you directly, rude, right? And I can come with these lofty goals and lofty morals and lofty values, but man, I'm still stuck. I'm still stuck in me, and I can't get freedom from me. Now, this next line you can highlight, underline, and we can make a little note that we're going to come back to this, because we're going to come back to this in step 4 in column 4 of our resentments. So it says selfishness, self-centeredness. Boom, exclamation mark. Again, I always make a little note because we don't see a whole lot of exclamation marks. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. Now, if anyone here is wondering, hey, what's the difference between selfishness and self-centeredness? Well, how I've learned to define it as selfish is how I act in the world. And self-centered is how I think and perceive. Bear with me. Selfish is when, I do this every time, selfish is when I steal your car, I sleep with your husband, and I pee on your carpet. Self-centered is when I'm worried you don't like me because I did those things. You know what I mean? That's the difference. Fair enough. And again, follow that up with, I would never do that. It was linoleum. That's my Red Bear joke about selfish and self-centered. So that we think is the root of our troubles. And goodness gracious, doesn't that seem like a bit of a bait and switch? You know, maybe we come to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think my problem is alcohol, or Cocaine Anonymous. My problem is drugs, or, you know, I come to Codependence Anonymous, and it's codependency, or, you know, whatever fellowship that brings you here. And I think the substance is my problem. And then I learn that no, my problem is that I cannot stop myself from taking that first drink or drug or compulsive act. I can't stop myself. And now it goes to selfishness and self-centeredness. That is the root of our troubles. That is the underpinning of all my problems. And how could that be? Well, here's what I find experientially. Experientially, when I am in self, I am cut off from the sunlight of the spirit. When I am in self, I am in pain. And man, if you're really relating to the actor and director, it's not like, it's like, dude, I hear you. It is painful to live in the bondage of self, what we're going to read on page 63. It is painful to live that way. And when I live from that place of pain, all I can think about is my pain. Anyone ever hear? I mean, we've all stubbed our toe. I do that a lot less now. That's a wheelchair joke. But if you've ever experienced pain or chronic pain, you know the pain is the only thing that you can think about. And you see, it's like that for me spiritually. The only thing I can think about is my pain, and that drives that self-centeredness. And when I'm thinking and perceiving the world from a place of self-centeredness, that is from which I act. That what about me, trying to get what I can get, and I'm acting from pain. But the more that I do that, the more I block myself off from God, which is the root of the pain. So selfishness, self-centeredness, that is what is blocking me from that power, which is God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. And what I need is to get unblocked so I can stay connected. And if that happens, man, I can live in the grace. I can live in the sunlight of the spirit. But I cannot live there with selfishness and self-centeredness. So that we think is the root of our troubles. And you'll notice in Bill's story, it talks about like root and branch, take it all. And that's what I need to be free of. Oh, also, it's going to be some lame news. I can't get rid of that on my own. Spoilers, we got some I can't get rid of stuff on my own coming up. Lame, because I want to do it. Isn't that an ego-feeding proposition? Man, I've come to the end of myself and I can't do anything. But I want to do this, you know, feel better about myself. Anywho, all right, so driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. What I want to point out, anyone here ever in a meeting say something or hear something like, I took my will back and I started driving the bus again? Anyone? Yep. I got some news for you. That is incorrect. Sorry, I'm just ruining people's day all over the place. You were not driving the bus. The bus was driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. That's who's driving the bus. See, when I think, I started driving the bus again, I think, I maybe didn't do a great job at managing, my alcoholism or my drug addiction, but don't you worry, I got this whole career thing sorted out. We got a madman at the wheel. We've got who's driving 100 forms of fear, 100 forms of self-delusion, self-seeking. That's who's driving. This bus going off the road, off a cliff, it's not good. You know what I'm saying? And it says we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. And that is the order that we're going to see first. I step first. And that's going to be that fourth column of resentments. And they retaliate, that's going to be the second column. I can catch the retaliation right away, but I can't see where I stepped first. And it says sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation. I'm living my life, just doing my best, and out of nowhere, they kind of cause me harm, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably means just about pretty much always, find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. That I made a selfish, self-centered, self-seeking decision before that put me in a position to have that resentment. And what we're going to see is that is going to be true about like 95, 98% of our resentments. I stepped first. And that, just for you, so y'all know, for those who haven't done it, that's where the freedom lies. There's no freedom in me seeing that retaliation. The freedom is in me seeing where I stepped first. I didn't think so. Anywho, speaking of didn't think so, it says, so our troubles we think are basically of our own making? What news is this? They arise out of ourselves, right? Selfishness, self-centeredness. That's what's growing this root. Arise out of myself. And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. Again, if you're looking for a stage name for a band, I'm not saying, I am saying, welcome to the stage, self-will run riot. Woo! Yeah. This is what happens in my brain, and I'm sharing it with you. I apologize profusely. So self-will run riot. And when we get here, I'm like, no, that doesn't sound like me even a little bit. I can't relate. Though he usually doesn't think so. Oh, the book meeting us where we're at. Like, oh, I don't think that's me. Boom, I come to find out that it's me. And it says above everything. So more important than anything else, above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. I need freedom from selfishness more than I need freedom from anything else in my life. And again, if I'm not convinced, it says we must or it kills us. It's lowering the boom. We must or it kills us. God makes that possible. See, what I'm seeing is I need to be free from this. I need to be free from this or it will kill me and I can't do it. God is the one that has to do it. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. I can't do it. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, which is a great old-timey word that I need to use more often, just throwing galore into conversations. But many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Has that not been my experience? And we were talking about that a lot in step 2, that idea that I have morals and I have values and I have beliefs and I have these things that are crucially important to me, but I can't do it. Anyone here where family is important, but I couldn't show up for my family? You know what I mean? Examples like that. These things that are vitally important, but I can't do it. I can't be the person that I need to be, but I try. And the more that I try, I can't do it. Said neither could we reduce our self-centeredness. I want to do it. I want to reduce it. I want to squeeze run it. You know why I want to be the one to reduce my self-centeredness? So I get to feel good about me. Reducing my ego is an ego-feeding proposition. I want to do it, So it says neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. We had to have God's help. See, I cannot overcome self with self. I cannot employ more self to overcome self. What I need is God. Had to have God's help. Again, it's kind of a bit bait and switch, or not even a bait and switch. What I've come to find is that these 12 steps are not climbing this ladder of success. What I've found experientially is these 12 steps is outpouring more and more of myself to the unconditional love that is God. See, I come to this and I find I can't stay sober on my own power, and I've got to just outpour that to God. And I find that selfishness, self-centeredness, that is the root of my trouble, but I can't overcome that on my own, so I need to pour that to God. And then I'm going to find some resentment, some fears, some relationship conduct, some defects of character, same thing as shortcomings. I can't overcome them on my own. And it's giving more and more of me to this unconditional love that is God. But the thing is that the third step, I do not know that my will and my life will be cared for. But what we're going to see is that any time in this book, and we're going to see some third step promises coming up here in a little bit. If I would just not get ahead of myself, we would get there naturally, but here I go. We're going to see some promises. And any time in this book, I see a promise. But deeper than that, any time in my life, I experience a promise. That becomes evidence of God's care in my life. So I don't know in step 3 that I will be cared for. But as we take that leap of faith, we'll find that evidence of care. So that first requirement is that I be convinced that me running my life, we got a madman at a wheel, it is not working, it has failed. That's the first requirement. This is the next requirement. It says this is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. And so when I'm working with sponsees, when we get to this point in the book, I'm like, girl, you are fired. Doesn't matter if I'm working with a man. I'm like, girl, you are fired. I let them know they are fired. And I even send them a pink slip. I make up a little, because I'm fun. It's whimsical. I know some people are like, that's the stew. I know, but I do it. So I give them a little pink slip. They are fired from the management position of their life. On the pink slip, it gives a reason. It says for gross incompetence. See step 1 for further amplification. And so fired from the management position of their life. I give them this pink slip. I'm done. But you see, I can't. My life needs a manager. Somebody's got to manage it. And so it says, next we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. So we're going to trust that God, capital D, director, God is going to manage our life. It says here, he is the principal, we are his agents. Now, what I want to talk about is at the bottom of 62, we're talking about these different ways that we can orientate and relate ourselves to God. And so if one of these doesn't work for you, don't use it. That's why we've got a bunch of them, So he is the principal, we are his agents. What that very actually technically means is, Rob's got a great definition for principal in the chat, but a principal or an agent is somebody who is legally allowed to act on behalf of the principal. So again, like working on the principal's behalf. Now, if I look at this orientation toward God, that I'm working on God's behalf, that might change how we show up at the airport, how we show up to our family, how we show up to traffic, how we show up to work. I'm working for God. I'm a representative of God in everything I do. Now, that's what that actually means. But it's not as much fun as thinking, agent for God, pew, pew, like double O page, working for God, pew, pew, Like the blues. I have a sponsee that loves that Blues Brothers line where it's like, I'm on a mission from God, like, yeah, rock out. And then I'll talk about that when we get to step 4. I'm like, what's going to be my super cool mission? Do I get a laser? Do I get like a fancy James Bond car? What do I get? And it's like a house cleaning. You got to clean your house. I'm like, oh man, I wanted to jump out of an airplane or something, spiritually do that. I don't want to do the heavy lifting. Anyway. And then he goes on to say, and keep in mind, capital D director, capital B P principal. He is the capital F father, and we are his children. And that might not work for some people. Many of us, I never had a father figure growing up. And like we didn't have healthy relationships. And if that's not a thing that works for you, don't use it. But I think what we're looking at is that perfect ideal. That ideal of a father that I could have if I could have had one, that person that I turn to for strength and love and comfort. Could that be, when I'm scared, when I don't know what to do, when I don't know how to change my spiritual flat tire, that's who I turn to. Could that be the orientation? And again, if even me sort of describing it doesn't work for you, don't use it. You don't have to. That's why we got a bunch of them. He is the Father, we are his children. It says most good ideas are simple. And this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. The keystone is the stone that is the very center of the archway. And that is the stone which holds all the tension. And so this simple idea that God is going to be running my life, God is in charge, and I'm working for God, that simple idea is what holds the tension here in the 12 steps. I'm working for God. That's it. And it says, so I got fired from the management position of my life. I believe that there is a manager that could be doing a better job than me. Keep in mind, my life was a dumpster that was on fire. Anyone could have done a better job managing my life than me. But I'm believing that God could manage my life. I haven't gone to work for God. But what we're going to see here on the top of page 63 is what I like to call the employment contract. And of course, I will make a little employment contract responsees and send that to them too, again, because I'm fun. I know there's people that are sponsored by me and they're like, oh, it's subjective. But it says, when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new capital E employer. So now we're going to go and we're going to sign that employment contract. We haven't gone to work yet. And here's the contract. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. And so just like when you start a job at any job, and most of my jobs that I started working at didn't have contracts. And now I'm reflecting, I'm like, that maybe makes sense. But when you sign a job or start working, you sign an employment contract. And in that employment contract, it's going to give you things like what your salary is, whether you're hourly, whether, you're on salary, what your benefits are, whether you get dental or eyeglass coverage, which we can tell that I'm getting older because I care about that. Vacation days, all those things, like what's included. You've got a benefits package, what's in there. And that's covered in he provided what we needed. And I got some news. It is not what we want. That is different. I have a dear friend out in Ontario, and she's like, when we talk about things, and she's like, oh, girl, didn't know you needed that. Ugh. What I want and what I need are often two very different things. And just like in that employment contract, it's going to cover like, what are my responsibilities as an employee? What's in my job description? What hours do I have to be at work? Those sorts of things. And so that's covered here. If we keep close to him and performed his work well. How do I keep close to God? Well, I work these steps as a way of life. Like my life depends on it because it does. That is how I keep close to God. And what is God's work for somebody like me? Love and service. Being of love and service to those about me, especially as drunks and as drug addicts and the people that have suffered in the way that I've suffered, but to be of love and service to anyone who I come in contact with. And that's the employment contract. It goes on to say, established on such a footing. So now what this is the third step promises. But just for me, I find that they don't happen often just at step 3. We call them the step 3 promises. But they happen when I take action upon this orientation. I'm working for God. And I have, I forgot to bring it up so I could screen share it. I have a friend who made this really cool graph, which again is how you know that I'm fun at parties, because I'm like, oh, he's got a chart. Oh, I'll throw it in the WhatsApp. But it's this really cool chart. It's graph type thing. And it compares the third step promises with the 9th step promises, which is always fun when we can tie these threads together. So when I established on such a footing, established on the idea of I am going out and working for God. We became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs, which was news. I didn't know I would want to be less interested in my little plans and designs, right? Oh, thank goodness for that, though. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life, that orientation that switches from what can I get where there's never enough to what can I give? And the world becomes one of abundance. As we felt new power flow in, so that power which is God begins to work through me. As we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious, again, with knowing, I begin to know this presence of his presence. We began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. And my friend Terry, he likes to say, listen, if I am going to be reborn, something needs to die. What needs to die for there to be a rebirth? My selfishness, my self-centeredness. That is what needs to die. But from that death, I get to be reborn into who I always wanted to be, but never thought I could. That's who we get to be when we dive into this work in this way of life. All right, we're now at step 3. It's a whole lot of prep work for this third step. That's why I'm like simply a decision, not just got a lot of work to get there, right? We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our maker, capital M, and I love that's a sneaky little, capitalized word that you could use for God. And again, to be made. I love that idea of made with love and care. If that doesn't work for you, don't use it. That's why we've got a lot of capitalized things. Don't worry about it. Maker, as we understood him. And again, that word understand. In my 1930s dictionary, which is not the unofficial 1930s dictionary, just one that I had on the shelf, again, because I'm fun. In my 1930s dictionary, the word understand, one of the definitions of the word understand is to know through experience. So it is God as we know through experience. Because how often God doesn't understand God, I don't understand God. No, we're trying to experience God. So it says, God, I offer myself to thee. And what that means is, God, I'm giving me to you, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. So I'm giving myself to God so that God can do whatever God wants. It's none of my business anymore. And it says, relieve me of the bondage of self. And man, that's what's killing me. The bondage of self isn't the fun stuff. The bondage of self is that self-hatred, that fear, that self-pity, that thing that is eating away at me. That is the bondage of self. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. You'll notice that these aren't get me a pony prayers. Okay, God, if I'm good, bring a pony for Christmas, like Santa Claus prayer. No, this is God, take away the stuff in me that is blocking me from you. Take away the stuff from me that is blocking me from helping others. That's what I'm deciding to do. To work for God, help others. That's what I'm deciding to do. To do that, I got to work these steps. Take away my difficulties, not because they're difficult, chicken difficult. I have a thing with my niece where it's like, easy peasy lemon squeezy, and I'll be like easy peasy chicken breezy, because I think the chickens like being in the breeze because it's windy and it feels like flying, which is difficult, chicken difficult when I swap it around. So I just needed to explain why I put a chicken in the middle of that. Sorry, it's a tangent, but thought it was important for some context, but maybe not. Y'all know how I am. You'd be like, she put a chicken in the middle of this page. All right. Take away my difficulties. Not because they're hurt, they suck and they're difficult. No, take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that I would help with capital T, capital P, capital T, capital L, capital T, capital W, thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. This is a way of life. May I do thy will always. And see, that's the thing, what I'm saying in this prayer. Take away the stuff that's blocking me from you so I can be of use to you and others. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. That abandon, see the top of page 59, where it talks about, we ask his protection and care with complete abandon. It's a leap of faith. It's a leap of faith that I'm taking. And when I work with my sponsees and we're going through the book like this, I like to read this like this. I said, we found it very desirable to take the spiritual step with an understanding person. That's me. Such as our wife. That's not me. Best friend. That doesn't need to be me. Or spiritual advisor. There's me again. So what I'm trying to say is, like, we're doing this third step together. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. That's not me. We're good. And it says the wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we express the idea of voicing it without reservation. So what I like to do with when I work with my sponsees is we'll say the third step prayer together. And then what I ask them to do is to say it in their own words. And the reason why is because it says to do that, but also it's a little uncomfy. It's a little uncomfy and it's a little awkward, but it is a leap of faith. And it is a leap of faith that we get to draw that experience from. But because I'm not going to ask you to do something I'm not doing, here's what I'll do. I'll say it first. And so quite often I just not make up, but I just say a third step prayer in my own words and they say one of theirs. And it says, this was only a beginning. So we're not done at step 3. There's some work. I just decided I'm going to go to Mexico. I gotta get to that airport, This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. So we're right on the hour. I know I wasn't sure if we'd do it, but we're right on the hour. So why don't we wrap it up there? We'll pick up step 4 next week. So I'll stop the recording and thanks everyone for coming.